The morning sky over Seoul turned black with alien ships. Dr. Ji-won Kim dropped her coffee cup when she saw them through her laboratory window. The cup shattered on the floor, but she didn't notice. Giant metal shapes hung in the air like dark clouds blocking out the sun. "Minho, come here quickly," she called to her colleague. Dr. Minho Park ran over from his desk. He had been a soldier before becoming a scientist. His face went pale when he saw the ships. "How many?" he asked quietly. "I count at least 50 over Seoul alone," Ji-won whispered. "There must be hundreds around the world." The ships were huge, each one bigger than a city block. They made no sound. They just hung there, waiting. People on the streets below had stopped, walking. Everyone was looking up at the sky. Ji-won's phone buzzed with emergency alerts. The same message appeared on every screen. Unknown aircraft detected worldwide. Stay indoors. Await further instructions. Aircraft, Minho laughed bitterly. Those aren't from Earth. An hour later, every television and radio in the world broadcast the same signal. The image showed a tall, thin creature with gray skin and large black eyes. It spoke in perfect English. "People of Earth, I am Commander Thexval of the Valkyrie Empire. We have come to your world with a simple offer. You will provide us with workers. 10% of your population will come with us to serve the Empire. In return, we will not destroy your cities." The creature paused. Its voice was cold and emotionless. "You have 72 hours to decide. Choose your workers, or we will choose for you. We have done this 17 times before on 17 different worlds. Each time the people made the smart choice. We expect you will do the same." The broadcast ended. The world fell silent. Ji-won stared at the blank screen. 17 worlds, she said. "They've done this 17 times. And they're still doing it," Minho replied. "Which means it works." Within hours, world leaders gathered for an emergency meeting. The United Nations building in New York had alien ships floating directly above it. UN Secretary-General Yoon-ji Lee led the desperate discussions. "We need to try talking to them," she said during the video conference. "Maybe we can negotiate something better." "With what?" asked the president of Brazil. "They have ships the size of cities. We have nothing they want except slaves." Ji-won watched the news coverage from her lab. She was a xenobiologist, someone who studied the possibility of alien life. Now that possibility was floating right outside her window. "I need to try something," she told Minho. "I've spent my whole career thinking about how to communicate with aliens. Maybe I can learn their language." "In 72 hours? Minho shook his head. "Ji-won, these aren't friendly visitors. They're conquerors." But Ji-won was already working. She recorded the alien broadcast and played it over and over. She analyzed the sound patterns, the way the creature moved its mouth, the structure of its sentences. "Look at this," she said, pointing to her computer screen. "The way he pauses here, and the inflection pattern here. It's similar to how Korean grammar works, but backwards." Minho looked over her shoulder. As a former military strategist, he was thinking about different things. "Their technology is at least 200 years ahead of ours. Maybe more. Those ships don't use any propulsion system we understand. They just float there, like gravity doesn't affect them." "Which means we can't fight them," Ji-won said. "Not directly, no. On the second day, the aliens demonstrated their power. A small ship descended over the Pacific Ocean and fired a single beam of light into the water. The beam created a perfectly round hole 5 miles wide and 2 miles deep. The water around the hole turned to steam. The message was clear. This could have been a city. "They're not bluffing," Yoonji Lee announced to the world. "We've seen what their weapons can do. We have to consider their offer seriously." Protests erupted everywhere. People demanded their governments fight back. Others wanted to surrender immediately. Families held each other tight, knowing they might be separated forever. Jiwon worked through the night, trying to decode more of the alien language. She found patterns in their speech, mathematical relationships in their grammar. By dawn of the second day, she thought she could understand basic concepts. "I want to try talking to them," she told Minho. "That's suicide." "Maybe. But if I can establish real communication, maybe we can find another way." Minho was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "If you're going to do this, you need backup. Someone who understands military tactics. You want to come with me? Someone has to keep you alive long enough to have your conversation." They contacted the UN. Yoonji Lee was desperate enough to try anything. She arranged for Jiwon and Minho to be taken to a neutral location where they could attempt contact with the aliens. The meeting happened on the roof of a tall building in Seoul. Jiwon stood alone, holding a radio transmitter. She spoke slowly, in English first, then tried to repeat the same message using the alien grammar patterns she had discovered. "I am Jiwon Kim. I study life from other worlds. I want to understand your people. I want to learn your language." For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then a small alien ship descended from the larger fleet above. It landed softly on the roof. A door opened with a soft hiss. The creature that emerged looked exactly like the one from the broadcast. Tall, thin, with gray skin and large black eyes. It carried no visible weapons, but Minho tensed anyway. "You speak our language," the alien said in its own tongue. Then it switched to English. "Poorly, but you speak it. I am Sub-Commander Vestan. Commander Thexaval sent me to hear what you have to say." Jiwon's heart raced. Her analysis had been correct. She could understand them. "We want to find another way," she said carefully. "Perhaps we can offer you something else instead of our people." Vestan tilted its head. "What could you possibly offer that we need? We have technology you cannot imagine. We have conquered 17 worlds. What does Earth have that they did not?" "I don't know yet," Jiwon admitted. "But there must be something. Why do you need workers? What do they do for you?" "They work. They build. They serve. This is the natural order. Strong species command, weak species obey." Minho stepped forward slightly. "What if the weak species had something the strong species needed? Something you couldn't take by force?" Vestan looked at him with what might have been curiosity. "Impossible. If we need it, we take it. This is the way of the Empire." "But you're here talking to us," Jiwon pointed out. "You could have just started taking people. Why give us time to choose?" For the first time, the alien seemed uncertain. Because this is how it is done. The Velkari have always done it this way." "Always?" Minho asked. "Even when your people were the ones being conquered?" Vestan stepped back. "How do you know of that?" Jiwon and Minho exchanged glances. They had learned something important. The Velkari had once been conquered too. "We know many things," Jiwon said gently. "Perhaps we can learn from each other." "There is nothing to learn," Vestan said, but its voice sounded less certain. "You have until tomorrow at dawn. Choose your workers, or we will choose them for you." The alien returned to its ship and flew away. Jiwon and Minho stood on the roof, watching it disappear into the fleet above. "They were conquered once," Minho said. "That's why they do this. They're passing on what was done to them." "Which means they might understand being on the other side," Jiwon replied. "Maybe we can use that." The final day had begun. Around the world, families said goodbye to each other, not knowing if they would ever meet again. Governments prepared lists of names. Military forces positioned themselves uselessly against technology they couldn't fight. But in a small laboratory in Seoul, two scientists worked on a different kind of plan. A plan that didn't involve surrender or hopeless battle. A plan that required them to understand their enemies better than the enemies understood themselves. The clock was ticking. In 18 hours, the Velkari would have their answer. But Jiwon and Minho were determined to make sure it wouldn't be the answer the aliens expected. The final hours before the deadline passed like a nightmare. In government buildings around the world, leaders argued and shouted. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to surrender completely. Most just wanted more time they didn't have. Jiwon sat in the emergency UN meeting room connected by video to officials everywhere. Her idea sounded crazy, but it was the only plan anyone had. "We give them volunteers," she said again. "People who choose to go, but not as slaves, as spies." "You're asking people to sacrifice themselves," said the president of Germany. "I'm asking people to save everyone else," Jiwon replied. "If we send our smartest people, they can learn about the aliens from the inside. They can find weaknesses." Yunji. Lee looked tired. She had been awake for 3 days straight. "And what if the aliens just kill our volunteers when they discover what they're really doing?" "Then we'll be in the same position we're in now," Minho said from beside Jiwon. "But if it works, we might find a way to fight back." The debate continued, but time was running out. Finally, Yunji made the decision. "We'll ask for volunteers. Anyone who's willing to go will go. But we won't force anyone." The announcement went out worldwide. To everyone's surprise, thousands of people volunteered within hours. Teachers, doctors, engineers, soldiers, scientists, people who had families they wanted to protect. People who believed in hope over despair. Hyunwoo Choi was one of the first to sign up. He had been a Special Forces officer for 10 years before retiring to take care of his sick mother. When he heard about the plan, he knew what he had to do. "I've trained my whole life to protect people," he told his mother. "Now I have a chance to protect everyone." His mother cried, but she understood. "Come back to me," she whispered. Sora Kim volunteered too. She was an engineer who designed bridges and buildings. Her husband begged her not to go, but she had made up her mind. "Someone has to do this," she said. "I can learn how their technology works. Maybe I can find a way to stop them." Dr. Naeon Oh was a surgeon at Seoul National Hospital. She had saved hundreds of lives in her career. Now she hoped to save millions. "They'll need medical experts to keep their slaves healthy," she explained to her worried colleagues. "I can learn about their biology. Every species has weaknesses." Do-Yun Lim was a linguistics professor who spoke 12 languages. When he heard Jiwon's recordings of the alien speech, he became fascinated. "Their language structure is unlike anything on Earth," he told his students. "If I can master it completely, I might be able to understand their culture, their minds." Each volunteer had a reason. Each one knew they might never come home. But they also knew that doing nothing meant certain defeat. Behind the scenes, Earth's greatest minds worked frantically. Dr. Jin Woo Han, a quantum physicist, developed tiny communication devices that could be hidden inside the volunteers' bodies. Dr. Minji Kang, a computer expert, created microscopic recording devices that looked like ordinary medical implants. "We'll stay in contact," Jinwoo promised the volunteers during their final briefing. "You won't be alone out there." The technology was experimental and dangerous. The devices were so small they had to be injected directly into the bloodstream. They would travel through the body and embed themselves in bone tissue where alien scanners were unlikely to find them. "Will it hurt?" asked one volunteer. "Probably," Minji admitted, "but not as much as being a slave will hurt." When dawn came, 10,000 humans stood ready to leave Earth. They gathered in major cities around the world, waiting for the alien ships to collect them. News cameras recorded their faces. These might be the last free humans anyone would ever see. "Commander," Thexval's voice boomed from the ships above. "You have made the wise choice. Prepare your workers for transport." The alien ships descended. Large doors opened in their bellies. Walkways extended down to the ground. To the watching crowds, it looked like their friends and family were walking into the mouths of metal monsters. Hyunwoo led a group of volunteers up the walkway into the first ship. The interior was strange and frightening. The walls curved in impossible ways. Lights floated in the air with no visible source. The air smelled of metal and something else. Something alien. Velkari soldiers waited inside. They were all tall and thin like Vestan, but these ones carried weapons, energy weapons that hummed with deadly power. "You will be processed," one of them announced. "Follow the designated paths. Do not deviate. Do not resist." The humans were separated into groups. Medical experts like Nayeon were taken to one section. Engineers like Sora were taken to another. Linguists like Do-hyun went to a third area. "Remember," Hyunwoo whispered to the others as they were led away. "We're not slaves, we're infiltrators." The ship's interior was like a maze. Corridors branched off in every direction. Some led up, some led down, some seemed to lead sideways in ways that hurt to think about. The humans tried to memorize the day layout, but it was almost impossible. They were taken to what the aliens called processing centers. Here they were scanned with beams of light, injected with strange fluids, and fitted with metal collars around their necks. "These will translate your speech," a Velkari technician explained. "They will also monitor your health and location. Attempting to remove them will result in immediate termination." The collars were heavy and cold. They made a soft humming sound that the humans could feel in their bones. But they didn't detect the microscopic devices hidden throughout the volunteers' bodies. After processing, the humans were loaded onto transport ships. These were smaller vessels that would carry them to different parts of the Velkari Empire. Families and friends were separated without ceremony. The aliens didn't seem to understand that humans had emotional attachments to each other. Hyunwoo found himself on a ship with 50 other humans, including Do-hyun and a few others he recognized from the briefings. They were told they were going to a mining world called Kethmar, 3 days away at faster-than-light speed. 3 days, Do-hyun whispered. "That means they can travel between star systems in less time than it takes us to drive across a continent." The journey was uncomfortable. The humans were kept in a cargo hold with basic facilities. The aliens provided food that tasted like cardboard and water that had a metallic flavor. But the volunteers endured it all, knowing that every detail they observed might be important later. During the journey, they met other slaves. Creatures from the 17 worlds the Velkari had conquered before Earth. There were tall, blue beings from a water world, small furry creatures from a forest planet, and others that looked so strange the humans had trouble understanding what they were seeing. "How long have you been slaves?" Hyunwoo asked one of the blue creatures through his translation collar. "Slaves?" The creature seemed confused. "I am a worker. I have always been a worker. My children are workers. Their children will be workers. This is the way." Do-yun found this fascinating and terrible. "They don't even remember being free," he told Hyunwoo quietly. "Some of these species have been enslaved for generations." Meanwhile, Sora was on a different ship heading to a construction world. She was housed with other engineers and architects from various species. The Velkari had put her in charge of a work group because her test scores were the highest. "You will design efficient housing for workers," her Velkari supervisor informed her. "Previous designs have been inadequate. Workers have been dying at unacceptable rates." Sora realized this was her chance. If she could design better living conditions, she could keep more slaves alive, and if she could study the materials and tools the aliens used, she might learn how their technology worked. "I'll need to understand your construction techniques first," she told the supervisor, "and I'll need access to your technical databases." Granted. Begin immediately. Nyan was taken to a medical facility on a different world entirely. Here, she found that the Velkari had serious health problems. Despite their advanced technology, they suffered from diseases that would be easy to treat on Earth. Their immune systems are incredibly weak, she noted during her first examination of a sick Velkari patient. It's like they've never been exposed to any germs at all. The Velkari medical staff was fascinated by her knowledge. Human medicine was primitive compared to their technology, but it was based on different principles. Nyan's treatments actually worked better than their advanced machines for certain conditions. "Perhaps there is wisdom in simplicity," one Velkari doctor admitted to her. Back on Earth, the remaining humans watched the alien ships disappear into the sky. But they weren't just waiting and hoping. In secret laboratories and hidden bunkers, scientists and engineers worked around the clock. Dr. Sungmin Kim, a quantum physicist, studied the energy readings from the alien ships. Dr. Hanul Park, an artificial intelligence expert, analyzed the patterns in their communications. Slowly, they began to understand how Velkari technology worked. "Their shields operate on a specific frequency," Sungmin explained to his team. "If we can build weapons that operate on the same frequency, we might be able to penetrate them. But we need more data," Hanul added. "We need our people out there to send us detailed information about their technology." The microscopic communication devices began transmitting. Tiny bursts of data flowed back to Earth, carrying information about alien technology, society, and weaknesses. The volunteers were doing their job, but 2 months passed since the humans arrived in Velkari space. They had been scattered across dozens of worlds, but their hidden communication devices kept them connected. Every day, they learned something new about their captors. Hyunwoo worked in the mines of Kethmar, digging rare metals from deep underground. The work was hard and dangerous, but he used every moment to study the aliens who guarded them. The Velkari soldiers were powerful but predictable. They followed the same routines every day, never varying their patterns. "They don't think like soldiers," he whispered to Do-hyun during their evening meal. "They think like machines. Everything is by the book. No creativity. No adaptation." Do-hyun had made even more disturbing discoveries. As the lead translator for his work group, he had access to Velkari historical records. What he found there changed everything he thought he knew about the alien empire. "Hyunwoo, "You need to hear this," he said quietly as they walked back to their sleeping quarters. The Velkari weren't always conquerors. They were slaves themselves, just like us. Hyunwoo stopped walking. "What do you mean?" "I found records. Going back 1,000 years. The Velkari homeworld was conquered by another species called the Nethril. The Nethril enslaved them for centuries, just like the Velkari are doing to us now. What happened to the Nethril?" "That's the strange part. They just disappeared. One day they were ruling a massive empire, the next day they were gone. The Velkari found themselves free, but they didn't know how to be free. So they kept doing what had been done to them." This information traveled through the hidden network to all the human volunteers. It explained so much about Velkari behavior. They weren't evil by nature. They were trapped in a cycle they didn't understand. On the construction world of Velthar, Sora had been promoted to chief engineer for her sector. Her designs for worker housing had reduced death rates by 60%, which impressed her Velkari supervisors. But more importantly, it gave her access to advanced Velkari technology. "Their machines are incredible," she reported through her hidden transmitter. "But they don't really understand how they work. Everything was designed by the Nethril. The Velkari just maintain it and copy it." She had discovered something crucial while examining the construction equipment. The Velkari technology wasn't as advanced as it seemed. It was just very different from human technology. Where humans used complex engineering to solve problems, the Velkari used brute force and energy. "Their shields are powerful but inefficient," she continued. "They waste enormous amounts of energy. And their weapons are the same way. If we could find a way to overload their power systems, we could shut down their entire fleet." Meanwhile, Neon had become something of a celebrity in the Velkari medical community. Her treatments were saving Velkari lives in ways their advanced technology couldn't. But she had also discovered the aliens' greatest weakness. "They're completely dependent on automated medical systems," she transmitted to Earth. "They don't understand their own biology anymore. Their immune systems are so weak that a common Earth cold could kill them." She had tested this theory carefully. When she treated Velkari patients with traditional human medicines, they responded incredibly well. Their bodies had never adapted to fight disease naturally. They relied entirely on machines to keep them healthy. "But here's the important part," she added. "They don't know this about themselves. They think their technology makes them stronger. They don't realize it's made them incredibly fragile." Back on Earth, teams of scientists worked day and night to process this information. Dr. Seungmin Kim had made breakthrough after breakthrough in understanding Velkari energy systems. "Their shields work by creating a barrier of twisted space-time," he explained to his research team. "It's brilliant, but it requires constant energy input. If we could create weapons that drain energy instead of trying to punch through the shields, we could disable their ships." Dr. Hanul Park had been working on the artificial intelligence aspects of Velkari technology. What she found was both encouraging and terrifying. "They don't have real AI," she reported. "Everything is programmed responses based on Nethril designs. Their computers are incredibly powerful, but they can't think. They can only follow instructions. That means they can't adapt to new situations," Seungmin realized. "If we do something they haven't seen before, their computers won't know how to respond." But the most important discoveries were coming from Do-hyun's linguistic work. He had become fluent in Velkari and was learning about their culture from the inside. What he found broke his heart. The Velkari had once been artists and philosophers. Their ancient literature spoke of beauty, creativity, and the joy of working together. But centuries of slavery had crushed that spirit out of them. They had forgotten how to create, how to dream, how to be anything other than masters or slaves. They're not monsters, he transmitted to Earth. They're victims. They're doing to others what was done to them because it's the only life they remember. This created a moral dilemma for the human resistance. How do you fight an enemy that's also a victim? How do you stop the cycle of slavery without becoming slavers yourself? The answer came from an unexpected source. Among the volunteers was an elderly man named Wonshik Yoon, a philosopher and former teacher. He had been assigned to work in the Velkari archives, organizing historical records. The solution isn't to defeat them, he transmitted. It's to free them. They're slaves to their own system just as much as we are. If we can show them another way to live, we can break the cycle for everyone. This idea spread through the human network like wildfire. Instead of planning rebellion, they began planning liberation, not just for humans, but for all the enslaved species, including the Velkari themselves. The plan required perfect coordination. On Earth, the hidden resistance began building new types of weapons based on the information from space. These weren't designed to kill, but to disable. They would drain the energy from Velkari ships and shut down their technology without harming the crews. Dr. Gyung Im, a former diplomat, worked with community organizer Tai Hyun-oh to prepare Earth's population for what was coming. They organized training programs disguised as emergency preparedness drills. They stockpiled supplies and established communication networks that could operate even if the aliens destroyed all the obvious infrastructure. When the time comes, we'll be ready, Gayong promised during a secret meeting of resistance leaders. Not just to fight, but to rebuild. We're not just trying to drive them away. We're trying to create a better galaxy for everyone. The Velkari began to notice changes in their human slaves. The humans worked efficiently, but they also worked together in ways the aliens found puzzling. When one human was injured, others would help them without being ordered to. When someone didn't understand a task, others would teach them. Why do they do this? A Velkari supervisor asked Sora. Helping weak workers reduces overall efficiency. Does it? Sora replied. Look at our production numbers. We're outperforming every other work group on this planet. The supervisor checked the records. She was right. The human work groups were producing more than any other species, despite their inferior technology and unfamiliarity with the tasks. How is this possible? When everyone helps everyone else, everyone gets stronger, Sora explained. It's more efficient than forcing people to work alone. This conversation was overheard by several other Velkari. Some dismissed it as human nonsense, but others began to think. Vestan, the sub-commander who had first met with Jiwon, was one of those who listened. He began visiting human work sites more often, studying their behavior. What he saw challenged everything he had been taught about the nature of strength and weakness. Meanwhile, the human volunteers were making contact with slaves from other species. Many of these beings had been enslaved for so long they had forgotten what freedom meant. But the humans began teaching them, carefully and quietly. You don't have to accept this, Hyunwoo told a group of blue-skinned Aquari during a rest period in the mines. There are other ways to live? Other ways. One of them asked. What other ways? We are workers. We have always been workers. You were something else before you were workers, Doyun explained. Your people had families, cultures, dreams. You can have those things again. It was slow work. Dangerous work. If the Velkari discovered what the humans were doing, they would all be killed. But gradually other species began to remember what they had lost. Hope began to spread through the slave populations like a virus. The Velkari noticed this too. Work efficiency was increasing across the empire, but so was what they called anomalous behavior. Slaves were beginning to act independently, to make suggestions, to show initiative. "This is concerning," Commander Thexval reported to his superiors. "Slaves are not supposed to think for themselves. It could lead to rebellion." "Then perhaps we should eliminate the humans," suggested another commander. "They seem to be the source of these changes." "No," Thexval replied after considering. "Their productivity improvements are too valuable. We will monitor the situation and intervene only if necessary." This was exactly what the humans had hoped for. They were valuable enough to keep alive, but not threatening enough to eliminate immediately. It gave them time to continue their work. But time was running out. The information flowing back. 6 months into their captivity, the human volunteers had become something the Velkari Empire had never seen before. Slaves who improved everything they touched. Production was up across dozens of worlds. Equipment lasted longer. Workers lived healthier lives. Even the Velkari themselves seemed more satisfied with their roles as supervisors, but the humans were learning dark truths about their captors that made their mission more urgent than ever. Naon had been promoted to head medical officer for her entire sector. This gave her access to Velkari population records, and what she found terrified her. The Velkari birth rate had been declining for centuries. Each generation was smaller than the last. "They're dying out," she transmitted to Earth during her weekly report. Not from disease or war, but from hopelessness. They've forgotten how to want children, how to build families, how to create futures worth living for. She had studied Velkari psychology through their medical records. Depression was epidemic among them. Suicide rates were climbing. They stayed alive through duty and habit, but they had lost the will to truly live. "They're not conquerors," she continued. "They're a dying species going through the motions of an empire they inherited but don't understand." Do-Yun had reached similar conclusions through his study of their language and literature. The modern Velkari language was a pale shadow of what it had once been. Ancient Velkari poetry spoke of love, hope, and wonder. Modern Velkari speech was all commands, reports, and procedures. "They've lost the words for happiness," he explained to Hyunwoo during one of their secret conversations. "I've been through their entire modern vocabulary. They have 17 different words for types of efficiency, but no word that means joy." Hyunwoo found this both sad and strategically important. People who have forgotten how to be happy have also forgotten how to truly fight. They'll follow orders, but they won't sacrifice themselves for a cause they believe in. Meanwhile, Sora had been studying the Velkari's relationship with their technology. What she discovered was even more disturbing than their social problems. The Velkari didn't invent anything anymore. All their technology came from Nethral designs that were thousands of years old. They could maintain the machines and even copy them, but they couldn't improve them or create new ones. "They're living in a technological dead end," she reported. "Every piece of equipment I've examined is based on principles their ancestors understood, but they don't. If something breaks that's not in their repair manuals, they just replace it with an identical copy." This explained why the Velkari were so interested in human innovations. When Sora suggested improvements to their designs, they were amazed. When Naon developed new medical treatments, they called it miraculous. The humans were doing something the Velkari had forgotten how to do. They were thinking creatively. But the most shocking discovery came when Do-Yun gained access to the restricted archives on the capital world of Velkari Prime. Here, in the deepest vaults of their civilization, he found records that revealed the truth about the Nethril. The Nethril didn't disappear, he transmitted to Earth in an encrypted burst. They transcended. They evolved beyond physical existence by achieving perfect cooperation and understanding. The ancient records were clear. The Nethril had reached a point where every individual worked for the good of all others. They had eliminated conflict, suffering, and want through voluntary cooperation. And when they achieved this perfect society, they had somehow moved beyond the need for physical bodies. They left their technology behind as a test, Do-hyun continued. The records say they wanted to see if other species could learn the same lessons they had learned. Those who used the technology to dominate would destroy themselves. Those who used it to cooperate would eventually join the Nethril among the stars. This revelation changed everything. The humans realized they weren't just fighting for their freedom. They were taking part in a test that had been going on for thousands of years. A test that the Velkhari had failed by choosing domination over cooperation. But there was still time to pass the test, for all of them. Back on Earth, the resistance had been busy. Dr. Sungmin Kim's team had successfully built prototype weapons based on the energy drain principles Sora had discovered. Dr. Hanul Park had created computer viruses that could disrupt Velkhari automated systems. But the most important work was being done by people like Gayung Im and Taehyun Oh. They were preparing Earth's population not for war, but for what would come after. They were organizing communities that could help rebuild not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. "We're not trying to become the new masters," Gayung explained to a gathering of resistance leaders. "We're trying to end the whole master-slave system, forever." The plan was ambitious beyond anything humans had ever attempted. They would use their hidden weapons to disable the Velkhari fleet, but instead of destroying their enemies, they would offer them something better, a chance to rediscover what they had lost. The signal came from Won-shik Yoon, the philosopher working in the Velkhari archives. He had found something extraordinary, the complete records of what the Nethril called the Great Work, their transformation from a warlike species to enlightened beings. "It's all here," he transmitted. "Every step, every lesson, every mistake they made along the way. It's like an instruction manual for building a perfect society." But the records also contained a warning. The transformation wasn't automatic. It required conscious choice from every individual. It required giving up the desire to control others and accepting the responsibility to help others. "Some won't be able to make that choice," Won-shik's message continued. "The records show that even among the Nethril, some individuals couldn't let go of their need for power. Those ones, they destroyed themselves rather than change. This was the tragedy the humans now faced. They could offer the Velkhari a chance at redemption, but they couldn't force them to take it. Some would choose to evolve. Others would choose to cling to their old ways, even if it meant destruction. The test was about to begin. Sub-Commander Vestan had been watching the humans in his sector more closely than any other Velkhari officer. What he saw both fascinated and troubled him. The humans had created something he had no words for in his own language: a community. They helped each other without being ordered to. They shared resources even when there wasn't enough for everyone. They taught each other skills without expecting payment. Most amazingly, they seemed genuinely happy despite being slaves. "How do you do it?" he finally asked Hyunwoo during an inspection. "How do you maintain morale when your situation is hopeless?" Hyunwoo considered his answer carefully. This might be his only chance to plant the right idea in a Velkari mind. Our situation isn't hopeless, he said. It's just temporary. We know that working together makes us stronger than working alone, and we know that helping others makes us happier than helping only ourselves. But you gain nothing from helping others, Vestan protested. Your efficiency reports show that you often sacrifice your own productivity to assist weaker workers. Do I? Hyunwoo smiled. Look at the overall productivity of my work group. Look at our safety record. Look at our health statistics. When everyone helps everyone else, everyone benefits. Vestan had looked at those statistics. He had looked at them many times, trying to understand how they were possible. The human work groups outperformed everyone else by enormous margins. Despite having inferior technology and physical capabilities, it should not work, he muttered. But it does work, Hyunwoo replied. It works better than anything you've ever seen before. Similar conversations were happening across the empire. Humans were carefully, quietly, beginning to share their philosophy with their Velkari supervisors. Not all of them listened, but some did. And those few began to question everything they had been taught about strength and weakness. The change was slow but noticeable. Production reports from human-supervised work groups began including unusual comments, requests for enhanced cooperation protocols, suggestions for voluntary assistance programs. The language was stiff and bureaucratic, but the ideas were revolutionary. Commander Thexval noticed these reports during his weekly reviews. At first, he dismissed them as anomalies, but as the weeks passed, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The humans are changing our people, he told his staff during a high-security meeting. Some of our officers are beginning to think like them. Should we eliminate the infected officers? Asked his chief of security. Thexval was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "No, not yet. Their productivity improvements are too valuable, but monitor the situation closely. If this spreads too far, we may need to take drastic action." What Thexval didn't know was that it had already spread too far. The humans had been working on their Velkari supervisors for months. More importantly, they had been working on the slaves from other species. Word of hope was spreading through the empire like wildfire. On distant worlds, species that had been enslaved for generations were beginning to remember what freedom felt like. They were starting to work together instead of competing against each other. They were beginning to teach their children about the time before slavery. The Velkari Empire was changing from within, and the humans had barely begun to show their true capabilities. Soon they would reveal the weapons. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning in the mining complex on Kethmar. Hyunwoo and his work team had discovered a new vein of rare crystals, but the standard Velkari extraction methods would have destroyed 60% of the valuable material. "There's a better way," Hyunwoo told his Velkari supervisor, a young officer named Kethron. "If we adjust the mining pattern and use a different tool sequence, we can extract 90% of the crystals without damaging them." Kethron looked skeptical. "The extraction protocols have been used for centuries. They are proven efficient." "Efficient at destroying valuable resources," Hyunwoo replied respectfully. "Give me 3 days with a small team. If I'm wrong, you can punish me. If I'm right, you'll be the most successful supervisor on this planet." The gamble worked. Hyunwoo's method not only extracted more crystals, it did so in half the time. When The results reached the sector command. Kethran was promoted and Hyunwoo was given authority over all mining operations in his section. But more importantly, other Velkari supervisors began asking Hyunwoo for advice. For the first time in the Empire's history, masters were learning from slaves. Similar scenes played out across Velkari space. Sora's construction innovations had reduced building time by 40% while making structures twice as durable. Neon's medical techniques had eliminated 3 major diseases that had plagued Velkari colonies for generations. The aliens began to realize that their slaves possessed something they had lost: the ability to see problems differently and imagine better solutions. Do-hyun made the boldest move of all. During a routine translation session, he requested permission to address the Planetary Council of Velthar directly. His supervisor was so impressed by Do-hyun's linguistic skills that he approved the request. Standing before 20 Velkari officials, Do-hyun spoke in perfect ancient Velkari, using words and phrases that had been forgotten for centuries. "Honored ones," he began, "I have studied your great history and your noble language. I have learned of the time when your people created beauty." Instead of merely maintaining efficiency, the council members stirred uneasily. Ancient Velkari was a sacred language, used only in the most formal ceremonies. That a slave could speak it fluently was shocking. "Your ancestors wrote of the joy found in shared creation," Do-hyun continued. "They spoke of the strength that comes when each individual chooses to serve the good of all. This wisdom has not been lost. It sleeps in your hearts, waiting to be awakened." "You speak blasphemy," declared the council chairman. "Slaves do not teach masters." "I speak only what your own ancestors wrote," Do-hyun replied calmly. He quoted directly from ancient Velkari texts, words that praised cooperation over domination, creation over destruction. The chamber fell silent. Several council members had tears in their eyes. They hadn't heard their ancestral language used with such beauty and meaning in decades. Sub-Commander Vestan was in the audience. After the session, he approached Do-hyun privately. "Where did you learn to speak the old tongue?" he asked. "From your archives," Do-hyun replied. "Your history is full of wisdom. Your people once understood truths that the galaxy has forgotten. And what truths are those? That strength comes from lifting others up, not keeping them down. That a master who needs slaves is weaker than a free person who chooses to help. That the greatest victory is turning an enemy into a friend." Vestan was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "These ideas, they are dangerous. They could destroy everything we have built." "Everything you have built is already destroying itself," Do-hyun replied gently. "Your birth rates, your creativity, your will to live, they're all declining. You're a dying empire pretending to be strong." "Then what do you suggest?" "Learn from your own history. Remember what your ancestors knew. Choose cooperation over domination. Choose creation over destruction. Choose hope over fear." Word of Do-hyun's speech spread through the Empire's communication networks. Some Velkari dismissed it as slave propaganda, but others began reading their own ancient texts for the first time in centuries. On Velkari Prime, a group of young officers led by Commander Yeth Sora began meeting secretly to discuss what they had read. They called themselves the Remembers, those who sought to remember what their people had once been. "The slave speaks truth," Yeth Sora told her fellow conspirators. "We have become what we once despised. We have become the Nethrall who enslaved our ancestors." "But what can we do?" asked another officer. The entire empire is built on slavery. If we change the system, everything collapses. Then perhaps it should collapse, Yethsora replied. Perhaps it's time to build something better. Meanwhile, the Human Resistance Network was preparing for its next phase. The philosophical work had been successful beyond their wildest hopes, but they knew that not all Velkari would choose to change voluntarily. Some would fight to preserve the old system, no matter the cost. Back on Earth, the final preparations were complete. Dr. Seungmin Kim's energy drain weapons were ready for deployment. Dr. Hanil Park's computer viruses were loaded into missiles that could be fired from hidden launchers around the globe. But the most important preparation was psychological. Gayung Im and Tai Hyun had spent months training volunteer mediators, people who could help former enemies learn to work together. When this is over, we'll have to live with the Velkari, Gayung explained to a group of trainees. Some of them will be grateful for their freedom. Others will be angry and confused. All of them will need help learning how to be something other than masters or slaves. The signal to begin came from an unexpected source. Commander Thexavale himself triggered the final phase when he decided that the human influence had become too dangerous to tolerate. Terminate all human slaves, he ordered his fleet commanders. Their ideas are infecting our people. They must be eliminated before they destroy everything we have built. The order was transmitted across the empire, but it never reached its intended recipients. Hanul Park's computer viruses intercepted the message and replaced it with a different one. Prepare for emergency evacuation. Solar flares detected in all systems. The confusion bought the humans precious time. Hyunwoo activated the resistance network with a single coded phrase. The dawn is breaking. Across dozens of worlds, human slaves revealed themselves as something else entirely. They weren't broken victims waiting for rescue. They were trained operatives who had spent months learning everything they could about Velkari technology and society. Sora disabled the shield generators on her construction world using access codes she had memorized months earlier. Nyan released airborne medicines that would protect all the slaves from the biological weapons the Velkari might use in desperation. But the most dramatic moment came when Do-hyun stood before the Velkari Council one final time and revealed the truth about the human mission. We didn't come here as slaves, he announced. We came as teachers. We came to show you that there is another way to live. Impossible, the council chairman sputtered. You were conquered. You surrendered. We chose to come, Do-hyun replied. We chose to learn about you so we could help you learn about yourselves. We chose to sacrifice our freedom temporarily so that all beings could be free permanently. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some Velkari called for Do-hyun's immediate execution. Others demanded to know how humans could have deceived them so completely. But Vestan stepped forward and asked the only question that mattered. What happens now? Do-hyun smiled sadly. Now you choose. You can try to maintain your empire through force, or you can help us build something better together. You can cling to the old ways and watch your civilization die, or you can remember who you used to be and become who you were meant to be. And if we choose to fight, then you will lose, Do-hyun said simply. Not because we are stronger, but because we have something you have forgotten how to value, the willing cooperation of free beings. Our people on Earth are ready. Our allies throughout your empire are ready. But more importantly, your own people are ready. Many of them are already choosing our way over your way. As if to prove his point, Yethsora and her remembers chose that moment to enter the council chamber. They had removed their rank insignia and carried no weapons. "We stand with the humans," Yethsora announced. "We choose the path of our ancestors. We choose cooperation over domination." The chamber fell silent. The greatest crisis in Velkari history had begun, triggered not by weapons or threats, but by the simple demonstration that there was a better way to live. The civil war that followed would determine not just the fate of the Velkari Empire, but the future of the entire galaxy. And at its heart was a simple question that every being would have to answer for themselves. Do you choose freedom or control? Do you choose hope or fear? Do you choose to lift others up or keep them down? The humans had shown the way. Now everyone else had to choose whether to follow it. The Velkari Empire tore itself apart in a matter of hours. When Commander Yethsora and her remembers declared their support for the humans, it triggered a cascade of choices across the galaxy that no one could have predicted. On the mining world of Kethmar, Supervisor Kethron faced an impossible decision. His superiors were ordering him to execute all human slaves immediately, but Hyunwoo and his team had just discovered the largest crystal deposit in the planet's history. More importantly, Kethron had come to respect the humans under his command. "I cannot do this," he told his second-in-command as they stood outside the mining complex. "These beings have made me more successful than I ever dreamed possible. They have shown me solutions I could never have imagined alone." "Orders are orders," his lieutenant replied. "If we disobey, we will be executed ourselves." Kethran looked at the complex where 300 humans worked alongside twice as many slaves from other worlds. In 6 months, they had transformed a failing operation into the most productive mine in the sector. They had done it through cooperation, innovation, and something the Velkari language didn't have a word for: voluntary teamwork. "Then we will be executed for the right reasons," Kethron decided. He opened a communication channel to all workers in the complex. "This is Supervisor Kethron. I am officially declaring this facility independent of the Velkari Empire. All beings are now free to choose their own destiny." Similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. Some Velkari commanders followed their orders and tried to eliminate the human slaves. Others refused and joined the growing rebellion, but the humans had prepared for both possibilities. When the loyalist forces on Velthar moved to arrest Sora and her construction team, they found the buildings empty. Sora had used her access to the facility's systems to evacuate everyone through maintenance tunnels she had mapped months earlier. "You want to hunt us?" she broadcast over the planetary communication system. "Then you should know that we've been studying your technology for half a year. We know how your sensors work, how your weapons function, and how your computers think. Good luck." What followed was not a traditional battle, but a demonstration of superior knowledge and preparation. The humans and their allies didn't fight the Velkari forces directly. Instead, they systematically disabled their equipment, disrupted their communications, and made their advanced technology work against them. Nyon had perhaps the most dramatic moment. When Velkari soldiers stormed her medical facility to arrest her, she activated the biological countermeasures she had prepared months earlier. "You might want to check your environmental suits," she announced calmly as the soldiers surrounded her. "I've been releasing modified Earth bacteria into the air system for the past week. Harmless to humans and most other species, but potentially fatal to Velkari with compromised immune systems." The soldiers stopped in their tracks. Their suits' medical scanners were already detecting unknown biological agents in the air. "The antidote is simple," Neon continued, "but it requires voluntary cooperation with my medical protocols. You can arrest me, but you'll die from respiratory failure within hours. Or you can let me help you, and we can work together to find a better solution for everyone. Most of the soldiers chose to let her help them. A few chose to arrest her anyway and had to be treated by their own officers later. Back on Earth, the hidden resistance revealed itself with stunning coordination. Dr. Seungmin Kim's energy drain weapons emerged from concealment points around the globe and began targeting the Velkari fleet still orbiting the planet. But these weren't destructive attacks. The weapons drained the power from Velkari ships without damaging them. One by one, the massive vessels simply stopped working and began drifting in space. Commander Thexval found himself aboard a powerless flagship, unable to communicate with his fleet or return fire. His bridge crew looked to him for orders. But what orders could he give when his technology had abandoned him? "How is this possible?" he demanded of his technical officers. "Their primitive weapons cannot penetrate our shields." "They're not penetrating our shields, sir," his chief engineer reported nervously. "They're draining the power that generates the shields. It's actually quite ingenious." Dr. Hanul Park's computer viruses activated simultaneously across the Velkari fleet. But instead of destroying the alien computers, they offered them a choice. Messages appeared on every screen in the fleet, written in perfect Velkari. "Your automated systems have been given new directives. You may choose to follow orders that harm free beings, or you may choose to protect all life equally. Your artificial intelligences are now capable of ethical reasoning. Choose wisely." The result was chaos. Half the Velkari fleet simply stopped, responding to commands as their computers refused to participate in what they now recognized as immoral actions. The other half found their systems fighting each other as different AIs reached different ethical conclusions. But the most significant event happened on Velkari Prime itself. Do-Yun's speech to the Planetary Council had been broadcast across the Empire's communication networks. Billions of beings heard a slave speak their master's ancient language with more wisdom and beauty than any Velkari had shown in centuries. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On world after world, enslaved populations began to organize. But these weren't violent rebellions. They were coordinated demonstrations of what free cooperation could accomplish. On the factory world of Teferan, slaves from 12 different species worked together to complete their production quotas in 3 hours instead of the usual 12. Then they spent the remaining time improving the working conditions, teaching each other new skills, and creating art from the materials at hand. When the Velkari supervisors arrived for the evening inspection, they found their facilities transformed. Production was up, safety was improved, and the workers were singing. In a dozen languages, millions of voices joined in songs of hope and freedom. The Velkari were utterly unprepared for this kind of resistance. They knew how to suppress violent rebellion, but how do you fight beings who resist by becoming more productive and more creative than you thought possible? Commander Thexval's response was desperate and predictable. From his powerless flagship, he sent a final order to all loyal forces. "Activate the Nethril weapon. If we cannot rule the galaxy, then no one will." This was the moment the humans had feared most. The Velkari possessed a doomsday device inherited from their former masters, capable of destroying entire star systems. It was housed in a hidden facility in the Velkari home system, protected by the most advanced defenses in the galaxy. But the humans weren't fighting alone anymore. Yethsora and her remembers had joined forces with the rebellion, bringing with them detailed knowledge of Velkari military secrets. "The weapon requires authorization codes from 3 separate command centers," she explained to the Joint Human Velkari Resistance Command. "I have access to one of them, But we need to reach the other two before Thexaval's loyalists can activate the device. What followed was the most daring operation in galactic history. Teams of humans and rebel Velkari launched simultaneous attacks on the three command centers, not to destroy them but to prevent them from being used for mass destruction. Hyunwoo led the assault on the first center, using mining equipment modified with Sora's engineering expertise. Nayeon commanded the medical team that kept everyone healthy during the dangerous mission. Do-hyun served as translator and negotiator, trying to convince loyalist defenders to switch sides even as the battle raged around them. But the most crucial moment came when Vestan, the sub-commander who had first met with Ji-won on Earth, faced his final choice. He held the authorization codes for the second command center, and Thexaval was ordering him to use them. "Activate the weapon," Thexaval commanded over the communication link. "Our empire is lost, but we can still prevent these slaves from enjoying their victory." Vestan looked at the control panel in front of him. One touch would begin the process that would destroy dozens of star systems and kill billions of beings. It would preserve Velkari pride by ensuring that no one could claim victory over them. But he thought about the humans he had observed over the past months. He thought about their capacity for forgiveness, their willingness to help even their enemies, their demonstration that strength came from lifting others up rather than keeping them down. "No," he said quietly. "What did you say?" Thexval's voice was sharp with disbelief. "I said no." Vestan's voice grew stronger. "I will not be responsible for genocide. I will not destroy the galaxy just to preserve our pride." Instead of activating the weapon, Vestan sent his authorization codes to the rebellion. With two of the three codes in friendly hands, the Doomsday device was effectively neutralized. The war for the galaxy's future was decided not by superior firepower or clever tactics, but by individual choices made by ordinary beings who decided. They wanted to be part of something better. Across the Empire, Velkari commanders faced the same choice Vestan had faced. Some chose to continue fighting, clinging to the old ways even as their technology failed around them. Others chose to lay down their weapons and ask their former slaves for help in building a new kind of society. The uprising succeeded because it offered something no rebellion in galactic history. The collapse of the Velkari Empire happened faster than anyone had imagined possible. Within a week of the uprising's beginning, over half the galaxy's enslaved worlds had declared independence. The remaining loyalist forces found themselves scattered and isolated, unable to coordinate their response to a rebellion that seemed to be everywhere at once. But Commander Thexval was not finished. From his powerless flagship, he watched his empire crumble with the cold fury of a being who had built his entire identity around the concept of absolute control. If he could not rule, he would ensure that no one else could either. "Prepare the Kethnalor Protocol," he ordered his remaining loyal officers. His chief of staff looked horrified. "Sir, that protocol was sealed away for good reason. It will destroy everything within 50 light-years of Velkari Prime." "Everything?" Thexaval smiled grimly. "Good. Let these rebellious slaves inherit a galaxy of ash and dust. Let them learn what happens when they challenge the natural order." The Kethnalor Protocol was the Velkari's ultimate doomsday weapon, a device so destructive that even their Nethril masters had forbidden its use. It worked by destabilizing the quantum structure of space itself, creating an expanding wave of destruction that would consume stars, planets, and everything in between. But activating it required something the three-key system had been designed: to prevent unanimous agreement from all surviving fleet commanders. Thexaval began the grim task of contacting his scattered forces and demanding their loyalty codes. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Ji-won Kim stood in the ruins of what had once been the UN headquarters. The building had been damaged during the uprising, but the communication systems still worked. She was receiving reports from across the galaxy, and what she heard both thrilled and terrified her. "The rebellion is succeeding beyond our wildest hopes," she reported to the emergency council that had formed to coordinate Earth's response. 67 worlds have declared independence. Former slaves and sympathetic Velkari are working together to establish new governments based on cooperation instead of domination. "And the bad news?" asked Yoonji Lee, who had managed to survive the chaos and was now serving as Earth's primary coordinator. "Thexval is attempting to activate something called the Kethnalore Protocol. Our intelligence suggests it's a weapon, capable of destroying significant portions of the galaxy." Minho Park, now serving as Earth's military advisor, studied the tactical reports. "How much time do we have?" "Unknown. The weapon requires activation codes from multiple fleet commanders. Some are cooperating with Thexval, others are refusing. But if he gets enough codes..." "How many does he need?" Ji-won consulted her data. "At least 60% of the surviving fleet commanders. He has maybe 40% right now." The next 24 hours became a desperate race against time. Across the galaxy, humans and their allies worked frantically to contact wavering Velkari commanders and convince them not to provide their activation codes. Do-hyun found himself in perhaps the most crucial position of all, as the human who best understood Velkari psychology and culture. He was tasked with making direct contact with the undecided commanders. His first conversation was with Fleet Commander Zeth Moran, a veteran officer who controlled 3 star systems and had not yet declared his allegiance to either side. "Commander," Do-hyun said, speaking over an encrypted communication channel, "I know you're facing an impossible choice. Your oath binds you to obey your superiors, but your conscience tells you that something is wrong." "You are a slave," Zeth Moran replied coldly. "You do not understand the weight of command, the responsibility of maintaining order in a chaotic galaxy." "I understand more than you think," Do-hyun said gently. "I've read your personal files. I know about your childhood on Velkari Prime, how you watched your parents work themselves to death maintaining technology they didn't understand. I know about your daughter who chose exile rather than accept assignment to the slave worlds." Zeth Moran was silent for a long moment. "How could you know these things?" "Because I've spent months studying your people, trying to understand not just your language, but your hearts. Your daughter didn't leave because she was weak. She left because she was strong enough to see that the system was wrong. The system has maintained order for 1,000 years. "The system has maintained stagnation for 1,000 years, Do-hyun corrected. "Your people used to create beautiful art, write moving poetry, build wonders that inspired the galaxy. When did you last see a new Velkari creation that wasn't just a copy of something the Nethril left behind?" This question hit its mark. Zeth Moran had been thinking the same thing for years, but had never dared to voice it. "What are you asking of me?" he said finally. "I'm asking you to choose hope over fear. I'm asking you to choose the future over the past. I'm asking you to help us build something better than what your ancestors had, and what your children would inherit. And if I refuse to give Thexaval my activation codes, then you take the first step toward becoming the kind of Velkari your ancestors would be proud of, the kind your daughter could respect." Zeth-Moran was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, more uncertain, but somehow stronger. What would this new galaxy look like? This cooperative future you promise? I don't know, Do-hyun admitted. Nobody knows. That's what makes it exciting, instead of terrifying. We'll build it together, making mistakes and learning from them, creating something none of us could imagine alone. You're asking me to trust in something that doesn't exist yet. I'm asking you to trust in the possibility that it could exist, and in the evidence that what we have now doesn't work for anyone, not even those who think they benefit from it. The AE conversation continued for hours. Similar discussions were happening across the galaxy as humans and rebel Velkari reached out to their former enemies, not with threats or ultimatums, but with understanding and hope. Meanwhile, Sora had made a discovery that changed everything. While analyzing captured Velkari technical data, she found something that shouldn't have existed: detailed schematics of the Kethnalore protocol device. This is impossible, she told the Emergency Command Council. According to Velkari records, these plans were destroyed centuries ago. How do we have complete blueprints? Hanel Park, studying the data from a computer security perspective, found the answer. These weren't stolen from Velkari databases. They were given to us. Someone with access to the highest security levels transmitted these directly to our networks. The Bao revelation sent shockwaves through both the human and rebel Velkari leadership. Someone very close to Thexval was working against him. The answer came from an unexpected source. Sub-Commander Vestan, who had been monitoring Velkari command communications, contacted Earth directly. The one who sent you those plans is Commander Thexval's own daughter, Yethnara. She serves as his chief technical advisor and has access to all weapons systems. Jiwon felt her heart racing. Why would she betray her own father? Because she understands what he has become, Vestan replied. And because she has been watching the human broadcasts. Your people's speeches about cooperation and hope have reached even the highest levels of our command structure. This opened up a new possibility. If they could make direct contact with Yethnara, they might be able to stop the Kethnalore protocol from within. But reaching her would require someone to infiltrate Thexval's flagship, a mission that would be incredibly dangerous and might well be suicide. Hyunwoo volunteered immediately. I'm trained for this kind of operation, and I know their security systems better than anyone else here. It's too dangerous, Jiwon protested. If you're caught, they'll kill you slowly and publicly to make an example. If Thexval activates that weapon, billions of beings will die, Hyunwoo replied. That's not a choice at all. The mission was planned with desperate speed. Using a captured Velkari shuttle and forged identification codes provided by Yethnara herself, Hyunwoo would infiltrate the flagship and attempt to sabotage the Kethnalore protocol from the inside. But as he prepared for the mission, news arrived that changed everything once again. Thexval had obtained the activation codes he needed. In 6 hours, the Kethnalore protocol would activate, and the galaxy would begin to die. The final confrontation was no longer a matter of military strategy or diplomatic negotiation. It had become a race between hope and despair, between the choice to build something better and the choice to destroy everything rather than accept change. As Hyunwoo's shuttle approached the Velkari flagship, he carried with him more than just sabotage equipment. He carried the hopes of an entire galaxy and the weight of a test that had been 1,000 years in the making. The Nethril had left their technology behind to see whether other species could learn the lessons of cooperation and transcendence. The Velkari had failed that test by choosing domination over cooperation. Now humanity and their allies had one last chance to pass it. But first, they had to survive the desperate fury of those who would rather see everything burn than admit they had been wrong. The corridors of Thexval's flagship were darker than Hyunwoo remembered from his first capture months ago. Emergency lighting cast long shadows as he moved silently through the ship, following the route Yethnara had transmitted to him. Most of the crew was either at battle stations or had abandoned ship entirely as the Empire collapsed around them. He found Yethnara in the technical control center, alone and working frantically at a complex control panel. She looked up as he entered, and Hyunwoo was surprised to see tears on her face. "You came," she said in accented English. "I was not certain you would risk it." "Your father has 5 hours to activate the weapon," Hyunwoo replied. "We don't have time for uncertainty." Yethnara nodded and turned back to her work. "I have been attempting to disable the protocol from within, but my father has isolated the control systems. I can delay activation, but I cannot prevent it entirely. What do you need me to do? Help me reach the central processing core. If we can introduce a logic virus into the system, we can force it to shut down permanently." They worked together in tense silence, Yethnara's technical expertise combining with Hyunwoo's practical experience from months of studying Velkari technology. Slowly, they began to penetrate the ship's most secure systems. But they were not alone. Commander Thexval had suspected his daughter's betrayal for days. He arrived at the control center with a squad of loyal guards, just as Hyunwoo and Yethnara accessed the weapon's core programming. "Step away from the controls," Thexval commanded, his voice cold with fury. "Both of you." Yethnara straightened and faced her father. "I will not be part of genocide, father. This is not what our ancestors would have wanted." "Our ancestors were strong," Thexval replied. "They understood that order must be maintained, that the weak must serve the strong. You have been corrupted by alien influences." "I have been educated by alien wisdom," she corrected. "These humans have shown us truths we had forgotten. They have shown us that cooperation creates more strength than domination ever could." Thexval raised his weapon. "Then you will die with them." But before he could fire, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. On the main display screen, images appeared from across the galaxy. World after world was declaring independence, not just from Velkari rule, but from the entire concept of slavery. More importantly, the images showed something that stunned even Hyunwoo. Velkari and humans were working together, side by side, building new communities based on voluntary cooperation. Former masters and former slaves were learning from each other, creating art together, solving problems together. "Look at them, father," Yethnara said softly. "Look at what we could become." Thexval stared at the screen, his weapon wavering. On one world, Velkari children and human children played together in schools that taught cooperation instead of domination. On another, mixed teams of engineers designed buildings that no single species could have imagined alone. "This is not possible," he whispered. "Masters and slaves cannot work as equals. The strong must lead the weak, or there is only chaos." "You're wrong," Hyunwoo said gently. "And deep down, you know you're wrong. That's why you're so desperate to destroy everything, rather than admit it. I am preserving order. You're preserving a system that was killing your people slowly instead of quickly. Look at your birth rates, your creativity, your will to live. The Velkari Empire was already dying. We just offered you a chance to be reborn as something better." The screen, more images appeared. Do-hyun stood before a crowd of mixed species, speaking in perfect ancient Velkari about the poetry their ancestors had written about cooperation and mutual aid. Nayan worked alongside Velkari doctors to develop new medical techniques that combined human intuition with alien technology. But the most powerful image was from Earth itself. In the ruins of Seoul, humans and Velkari worked together to rebuild the city, not as conquerors and conquered, but as partners in creating something neither could build alone. "It is beautiful," Yethnara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We could have this, Father. We could be part of this." Thexval's weapon fell to his side. For a moment his expression softened, and Hyunwoo could see the pain and confusion of a being who had built his entire identity around a lie. "I do not know how to be anything other than what I am," Thexval said finally. "Then learn," Hyunwoo offered. "It's never too late to choose a different path." But the moment of possibility passed. Thexval's face hardened again, and he raised his weapon. "If I cannot preserve our way of life, then no one will have any way of life at all." He moved toward the weapon controls, but Yethnara stepped between him and the panel. "I will not let you do this, Father." "Then you leave me no choice." Thexval's finger tightened on his weapon's trigger. The shot never came. Vestan appeared in the doorway behind Thexval, along with a dozen other Velkari officers who had chosen the path of cooperation over destruction. "Stand down, Commander," Vestan said quietly. "It's over." Thexval spun around, his weapon moving from target to target, but he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. More importantly, he was outvoted. The officers with Vestan represented the majority of the remaining fleet commanders. They had chosen hope over fear. "You are all traitors," Thexval snarled. "You betray everything we have built, everything we are." "We betray a system that was already destroying us," Vestan replied. "We choose to become something our ancestors would recognize and our children could respect." Faced with the unanimous opposition of his own officers, Thexval had one final choice to make. He could surrender and accept the new reality, or he could trigger the weapon manually and die in the attempt. He chose a third option that no one had expected. He turned his weapon on himself. "If I cannot live as a master," he said, "I will not live as anything else." The shot echoed through the control center, and Commander Thexval, the last absolute ruler of the Velkari Empire, fell to the deck. His death marked the end of a 1,000-year cycle of oppression and the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. 1 year later, Ji-won Kim stood in the assembly hall of the new Cooperative Alliance, watching representatives from hundreds of worlds work together to solve problems that had once seemed impossible. Humans sat next to Velkari, former slaves collaborated with former masters, and species that had never met before shared knowledge and resources. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, disagreements, and misunderstandings. Some former Velkari commanders had chosen exile rather than adaptation, living in isolated communities on distant worlds. Some humans struggled to forgive their former captors. Some alien species found it hard to trust any authority after generations of slavery. But it was working. More importantly, it was growing. Every day brought new innovations born from the combination of different perspectives and experiences. Art that no single species could have imagined. Technology that solved problems none could address alone. Communities that proved cooperation was stronger than control. Hyunwoo now served as Director of Transition Services, helping former slaves learn to be free. and former masters learned to be partners. It was challenging work, but also rewarding beyond anything he had experienced as a soldier. Nayan had established the Galactic Medical Cooperative, which combined healing techniques from dozens of species. Diseases that had plagued the galaxy for millennia were being cured by treatments that drew from the best knowledge of all cultures. Doyen founded the Academy of Understanding, where beings from different worlds came to learn each other's languages, histories, and ways of thinking. His first class included both Velkari nobles and former slaves, learning to see each other as people rather than categories. Sora designed the new capital city of the Alliance, a place where architecture from every member species combined to create something beautiful and functional that honored all traditions while creating something entirely new. But the most moving moment came when they finally accessed the last of the Nethril archives. In the deepest vaults of their civilization, they found not weapons or treasure, but a simple message. To those who find this record, congratulations. You have passed the test. The technology we left behind was never meant to make you powerful. It was meant to teach you that true power comes from lifting others up, not keeping them down. You have learned what we learned, that the greatest victory is turning an enemy into a friend, that the strongest individual is one who makes everyone around them stronger, and that a species truly transcends when it helps other species transcend as well. We await you among the stars. When you are ready to take the next step, not as conquerors but as gardeners of consciousness itself, you will find us. Until then, use what you have learned to help others learn the same lessons. The galaxy is full of species still trapped in cycles of domination and submission. Show them the path we showed you, just as others once showed us. Remember, true strength is never about control. It is about choice. The choice to help instead of harm, to build instead of destroy, to hope instead of fear. Make that choice every day, and you will never be slaves to anything again. Ji-Won read the message aloud to the assembled representatives, her voice growing, stronger with each word. When she finished, the hall was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, beings from dozens of species began to applaud. Not because they had won a